Today's episode is brought to you by Avant Realty. Avant Realty is located in Williamsville, New York, and was founded by Charles Glander and Nathan Marziali with the intention of creating a brokerage committed to outstanding customer service and professionalism. Avant Realty is also very dedicated to not only serving the people in Western New York, but also giving back. So if you're looking to buy or sell real estate, give Avant Realty a call and mention Cover 1. When you do, a $500 donation will be sent to a charity of your choice at closing. So get to AvantRealty.com or call Charles and Nate at 716-333-HOME. That's 716-333-4663. Josh Norman's tenure in Washington was a roller coaster ride, one that fans would say was a failure. Norman signed a $51 million deal back in 2016, making him the highest paid corner, so you know expectations were high. As is generally the case, Norman couldn't live up to the free agent deal. Time after time, Norman was blamed for bad play, blown coverages, and at times, he enabled the criticism with trash talking. The team underwent a regime change this offseason, one that included Norman's former head coach in Carolina, Ron Rivera, but the familiarity wouldn't be enough to keep him around because his $12.5 million cap was far too high. So the team released him, and Norman ended up in Buffalo, looking to regain his old form and change the league's perception of his play, much like the team that just signed him.
Who has the biggest change of a franchise? Buffalo got to be at the top, without a doubt. And that is really one of the reasons that made my decision to come over here, because you guys are like right here at the threshold of, breaking through onto that next level. And that is literally why I'm here, because that's something I feel like we can help and what we bring to the table in that space. And I know guys who leading this ship. So it's just going to be a fun ride.
Over the course of his 4 seasons in Washington, Norman surrendered 22 touchdowns, registered 7 interceptions, and 31 pass breakups. 3 of his interceptions and 15 of his PBUs took place his first season with the team under defensive coordinator Joe Barry. But it seemed that once Greg Minuski took over in 2017, Norman's play dipped. Some fans will blame it on Norman losing a step. Some will attribute his dip in play to the scheme, but it's obviously a combination of many things. And today, I want to dive into his film from 2019 to give you some context behind his struggles and show you what he does well so that you can see not only why he struggled at times in Washington, but how he can help out the Bills defense in 2020. Norman's 2019 campaign started out rough. He surrendered a lot of big plays early in the season, including this bomb to Deshaun Jackson. And this is the sort of play that had fans saying Norman lost a step, but let's take a deeper look. In week 1, Washington is up 17-0, and the Eagles are faced with a 3rd and 10 situation, with the ball on the 49-yard line. Pre-snap, the away team shows quarters coverage with Norman to the top of the screen. A smart coverage of play to protect deep, and to keep the ball in front of the players, given the scoring situation. But as the ball is snapped, the inside linebacker Sean Dion Hamilton drops into the deep hole as the defense drops into an inverted Tampa 2 coverage. This just means that the safeties become underneath players and the outside corners, including Norman, become the deep half players. The Eagles have a dagger concept called to the top of the screen, so Alshon Jeffrey is running a dig with Jackson running a clearing route from the number 2 slot. The defense showed a 2-high coverage look pre-snap, then dropped into 2-high coverage, but one that put them at a disadvantage deep. That sort of rotation puts Norman at an extreme disadvantage, and here's why. With both receivers working vertically, Norman has to gain depth but hold his deep half alignment. Once Jeffrey breaks inside, Norman doesn't have any help from the linebacker because he has to jump the dig route. Norman also doesn't have any help from his opposing corner to the bottom of the screen. That defender is essentially guarding grass instead of helping deep. So speedy receiver Jackson is untouched, hits top speed, and slightly bends the route because the middle of the field is open. Norman is behind the 8 ball with speed and leverage of the route, and Jackson puts up 6 on the board. If I had to criticize something on Norman on this play, is that I would like to have seen him apex the 2 vertical routes. So split the difference between the 2 of them. If he had done that, he would have been likely in a better position on Jackson. He doesn't, and Jackson has enough space to reel in the pass. A backbreaker given the situation. This sort of bad play calling, failed teamwork between the secondary, and the slightest bit of leverage disadvantage happened every single game. Here's another example of how rough things were in Washington. Linebacker John Bostic changes the coverage on 3rd and 10, but I'm not sure Norman got the coverage check. But the Eagles probably did. They likely recognize a coverage signal, so prior to the offensive team's headset being turned off, you will see Wentz audible. On the snap, Norman, who's to the top of the screen, is playing the receiver and not getting into his deep third responsibility. And that leaves Jackson, who came from the number 2 slot, wide open down the seam, the area that Norman is supposed to help protect. You see the same coverage called later in the game against the same down and distance, personnel, and formation. This time, Norman executes his assignment. Don't get me wrong, there were some lapses in judgment on film in 2019 for Norman, but when you break down his assignments within the framework of the coverage, there were a lot of times where communication broke down in the secondary, or he didn't get the help that he was expecting, much like this play against Dallas. Prior to the game, Norman was unimpressed with QB Dak Prescott's 4 touchdowns in Week 1, pretty much giving all of the credit to the Cowboys' offensive line by saying, "You stand back there in the pocket all day and go through your first, second, and third reads and come back to your first one? Okay, cool. Anybody can do that." Norman was immediately trashed all over social media when he gave up this long touchdown to Devin Smith. But was it even his fault? Let's take a look. On the snap, the Cowboys run a high-low combination over the middle, with Smith running a Dino post to the top of the screen. And with the 2 crossing routes coming over the middle, the deep safety executes a slice call. So he drives on the deeper crossing route to take away the offense's leverage against this single high look. But by doing that, he vacates the post, and Norman again doesn't have the leverage needed to the middle of the field. Typically when a slice is called, the corner to the bottom of the screen will replace the deep safety to help leverage the post route. Watch Tre'Davious White replace Jordan Poyer deep to eliminate this Yankee concept against the Dolphins. That's a perfectly executed slice call by the Bills defense. Defenders must recognize a route combination and then communicate it to their teammates, and the Bills do that just as well as anybody in the NFL. Norman's teammate is in La La Land, so Norman is left on an island in a coverage that gives him no help to the largest portion of the field. Prescott hits Smith deep, and the big play is charged to Josh Norman. This sort of cover 3 rotation is very common. Here is Panthers corner Dante Jackson helping out his teammate deep. Even Norman himself understands the concept. Against the Patriots, Norman recognizes the route combination, points out the crosser to his safety, the safety slices Julian Edelman's route, and Norman gets back to help leverage the post. It should be a routine play, but Norman didn't always get the same help from his teammates in the secondary. Here's another example where Norman was charged for a touchdown, when his teammate Landon Collins should have helped defend the pass, or at the very least deter the throw. Norman is playing with outside leverage and in a bail technique, which will easily surrender the quick passing game routes over the middle, but that's what is called. Norman has help from Collins inside once the ball is snapped, because tight end Mike Gesicki stays in to block. Unfortunately for Norman, Collins is easily moved by Fitzy. Fitzy basically looks to throw a dart at a mascot on the sideline, like a scene out of Varsity Blues, and it moves Collins just enough to throw a strike to Devontae Parker for the touchdown. Just another example of Norman expecting to have leverage help via the coverage, but is ultimately let down in the end. For the most part, Norman understands leverage very well, which is why he excelled in Bills head coach Sean McDermott's system in Carolina. Knowing the overlap areas in coverage and where your help is or won't be coming from is half the battle. On this play against the Giants, Norman knows he has no help to the post. So he accelerates to top speed, leveraging the high side of the receiver, uses his hands to take some speed off of the route, then flashes his body control to work around the receiver for the PBU. While it's true asking Norman to play man-to-man coverage on just about every play is a recipe for disaster, only 3 of his touchdowns surrendered in 2019 were via man coverage. The biggest issue I saw on film when Washington played man coverage was preparation and communication, something that starts with the staff and trickles down to the players. When Washington went to man coverage, they had opportunities to run banjo coverages to help the defensive backs, and they either weren't supposed to execute them, or the communication between the players failed, and the switches weren't carried out. Here's a play where I think Norman got caught thinking banjo or switch, but he was the only one thinking that. As Jamison Crowder motions to the slot and the ball is snapped, Norman appears to execute a banjo or switch to defend the flat route. So he jumps Crowder's route to take away the leverage the slot receiver has being off the line of scrimmage and with a defensive back in off coverage as he comes across the formation. But the number 1 receiver, Robbie Anderson, stems inside and runs an outbreaking route in the back of the end zone. The slot defensive back didn't execute the switch, so Anderson is wide open. While Norman's intuition to switch here was smart, it doesn't appear that it was schemed that way. Even though in the low red zone, a switch is often called because you don't want easy touchdowns on these kinds of plays that occur. Communication, especially in the red zone, is crucial, and Washington's secondary easily failed in this department in 2019. Here's an example. In week 3, you can see the Washington secondary trying to sort out the 3-by-1 formation. And just as the ball is snapped, the Bears fall into a 4-by-1 set, and that motion screwed up the man coverage that the defense had called. This forces the defense to adjust on the fly, and it looks like a switch or banjo call was on, but no one picked up the number 1 receiver coming all the way back across the field. Now fast forward to week 15, a touchdown throw to Greg Ward over Josh Norman. Another low red zone 3-by-1 offensive look. The defense is once again lining up late because they haven't sorted the receivers out. On the snap, they send 3 defenders with the flat route by their number 3 receiver and force Norman to work all the way across the field because no switch or banjo call was executed or called. That's a tough assignment for any cornerback to execute. As you can see, Greg Minuski's scheming when in man coverage was inconsistent, and the players were often taken advantage of. There were just so many plays, whether in man or zone coverage, where the secondary was ill-prepared or failed to recognize route combinations, allowing them to switch to defend efficiently. So big plays ensued, and that falls on Minuski and defensive backs coach Ray Horton. I truly believe that Norman still has some good ball ahead, especially now that he is back in McDermott's scheme. According to Sports Info Solutions, Norman surrendered 444 yards in 2019. 198 of those yards and 3 touchdowns were on 5 receptions, so the big plays, which we already outlined, were a big part of his struggles, but it didn't all fall on him. Norman is still very good against the short and intermediate passing game. I think his movement skills are still as good as they ever were. He has always been a bail-type cornerback who lacked long speed, but relied on his football IQ and opportunistic mentality to get his hands on balls. I especially like his play against bigger receivers. His ability to use his hands to disrupt routes and drop his hips to change directions is still very good against these types of receivers. Norman is in man coverage against Preston Williams, and Williams uses a stutter outside release, but Norman maintains his discipline. As soon as Williams breaks back inside, Norman uses his hands to slow down the break, allowing him to flip his hips and then break the play up at the catch point. Norman played this route in the red zone against savvy wide receiver Allen Robinson as good as you possibly could. On the snap, Norman hops forward and takes away the outside release, so Robinson adjusts and tries setting Norman up by making the route look like a slant. But then, he plants hard to release out wide on a fade route. Norman is in great position to choke the route, and he does so by getting his hands on Robinson and his eyes on the QB. An awful decision and read by Mitchell Trubisky, and Norman gets the interception. Where Norman will struggle is when he is aligned in the slot in man coverage. He gave up 143 yards on 8 receptions from the slot in 2019. At this point of his career, he is much better aligned out wide, when he can use the boundary as leverage, and he knows exactly where his help is. He will especially struggle against smaller, faster type receivers like he did against Taylor Gabriel and Julian Edelman. He just doesn't possess the change of direction that can match those types of route runners. But I'm sure McDermott and defensive coordinator Leslie Frazier won't ask him to be that guy. There is just so much talent around him that Norman won't feel the need to constantly be aggressive to make a play. All he has to do is play within the scheme and pounce when the opportunities arise. He'll be expected to do his 111th, like covering for Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde when a slice call is made on a deep over route. But he will also be asked to squat and jump a route in the flats even though they are in cover 3. But it has to be the right situation. The Bills are looking to generate more turnovers for their offense, and they believe Norman could help in that department. Given the talent around him, Norman has a very good chance of bouncing back. Safeties Hyde and Poyer are 2 of the best safeties in the league, and they disguise coverages better than any tandem in the league. Tre'Davious White is a top 3 corner any way you cut it. So teams are going to test Norman. If he can seize the opportunities that come his way, this signing is going to bode well for the organization and his reputation in the league. Because as he said,
we got the best secondary in the league. I think guys really sleep on Micah and Poe back there, because they really do a great job over the top, and then coming down in the box as well. They are 2 of the best tandems in the league. I think you take me consideration in that. And then you have Trey, obviously, on the other side. And then, he does a great job at just, keying on his man and having a guy in that position to go in and day out and make a play. And then you got Levi on the other side. He's doing a great job tearing in the nickel. I mean, you got so many guys that you can put into this position in secondary, and you see what they've done the last couple of years, been in the top of the league. So I don't expect anything else. I'm doing with a group that you see it's a bad group. It's a real bad group. Some ballers, and these guys got that over here.